The next chapter that we are going to discuss for today is about ecology, evolution, and classification. So this topic is actually subdivided to three subtopics. Not three subtopics, but there are three major topics that is being discussed in this area. So it is also a background information for HL students, because in the case of HL students, if they are going to take options, okay, option papers, one of the option papers is actually ecology and conservation. So having this this chapter, or discussing this chapter, would really help them have a foundation in ecology. In the case of SL students, this would also give them a brief background of how communities are working, and how populations are working as well. So the first part of ecology is when we are able to discuss communities and ecosystem. So in the case of communities and ecosystems, we are basically discussing about community ecology. So when you say community ecology, how a specific living unit of a specific living unit is actually working with their environment. Because basically, ecology is the study of living things interacting with their environment. Okay, so under the community ecology, there are several terms that is being used. So we have to define those terms as well. The definition of terms such as species, habitat, population, community, ecosystem, and the term ecology. Okay, so in this case, we should be able to make like a comparison, or the students should be able to like identify the difference between population and community, because population is a group of similar organisms that interact all together, that is occupying a specific area in a specific in a given time. Okay, whereas for community, it is a group of different organisms or different species living in a specific area at a given time. Okay, so right after introducing these terms all together to the students, we are able to move on to the next area, which is the feeding relationships. The feeding relationships of organisms within an ecosystem. So this is where this is actually discussing about how organisms are able to acquire nutrition coming from one organism to another, especially coming from a plant, or getting energy coming from plants, and they are being acquired by consumers or by animals. Okay, so we have to introduce terms such as autotrophs and heterotrophs. Okay, so we have to make a link between producers, producers, consumers, and the role of different types of consumers within an ecosystem, such as detritivore, and saprotrophs. Okay, so right after identifying the feeding relationships of different organisms, then we should be able to discuss how energy is being transferred from one organism to another, or how energy is being transferred within an ecosystem. So under this area, okay, we should be able to discuss what food chains are and their relationships to, what are the different factors under food chains. So, okay, and the relationship of food chains and food webs, or their differences. Okay, so right after identifying what a food chain and a food web is, then we should be able to identify terms such as trophic levels. So in trophic levels, this is basically a specific level at which a specific organism is feeding. So if we have a food chain, let's just say, okay, producer, and then we have a primary consumer, and then secondary consumer, and then tertiary consumer. Okay, so in the case of trophic level, the student should be able to identify where a specific organism is within a food chain. So by identifying where a specific organism is within the food chain, we should be able to, the student will be able to identify how much energy is being received by each consumer or by each organism. So by teaching what a food chain, food web, and trophic levels are, we should be able to give diagrams and examples as well. Okay, because in exams, they are actually requiring examples they're requiring students to give examples of food chains that are occurring in terrestrial ecosystem or even in aquatic ecosystem. So, okay, so knowing the organisms involved in each specific type of ecosystem and their scientific names, it would be able to help the students to make a diagram and achieve all the marks in exams. Okay. So, having discussed the trophic level, okay, we can now relate the trophic levels to energy flow, how energy is actually being made available to a specific food chain or in an ecosystem. So we should always start with the sun providing the initial energy for the whole ecosystems, because the light energy being provided by the sun is actually being utilized by producers to for them to undergo photosynthesis, and from there, this is the process wherein producers are able to synthesize organic molecules that can be used by other consumers as well. Okay, so right after energy flow, okay, we should be able to explain the types of pyramids of energy. So we have the pyramid of numbers, or more commonly known as ecological pyramids. Okay, so in the case of ecological pyramids, this is actually an illustration that will show how energy is being made available to the ecosystem. So we have two types of ecological pyramids. We have the pyramid of numbers and pyramid of energy. So we should be able to make a comparison between the two. Okay, so right after identifying the ecological pyramids, okay, since ecological pyramids is only discussing how energy is being made available to each trophic level, we should also take note that energy is not the only thing that is being transferred in each trophic level, but also nutrients. Okay, so since nutrients can be made available in each trophic level, but they cannot be, well, actually once they are being transferred to the next trophic level, they are not lost. Okay, so it is very important that nutrients has to be recycled. Okay, so in this case, the nutrient cycle that is needed to be discussed in this topic is carbon cycle. Once HL students discusses the option papers, they need to discuss an additional nutrient cycle, which is nitrogen cycle, okay, for HL students only. Okay, so of course for the nutrient cycles, we should be able to make a diagram and explain the relationships within within the cycle. Okay, explain the main processes. Okay, so for example, in the case of nitrogen cycle, what is the role of nitrification and what organisms that are actually performing nitrification in the nitrogen cycle. So, okay. So so last but not the least, once that we have discussed the processes under the nutrient cycle, we should be able to identify their significance. Okay, what is the role of, or what is the importance of cycling nutrients? It's because when energy is being transferred to each trophic level, once the energy is being used, it's already lost along the way. But in the case of nutrient cycle should not be lost because it is actually being transferred into a different form only. So, and it's very important for nutrients to be made available for each and every type of organisms. So that will be all in communities and ecosystems.